What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're into the fight talk. We've got Israel Adesanya, 20 wins, 1 loss, defending his UFC Middleweight title against Marvin Vettori. 17 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw. And this fight is actually a rematch between the two. The first actually took place right around 3 years ago. Imagine that. That really highlights how meteoric and sudden the meteoric rise of Israel Adesanya in the UFC has been. You know, he entered the UFC in 2018, and his second fight was against Marvin Vettori. So he came in, he being Adesanya, came in with a big reputation because of his kickboxing background, and his second fight was actually a split decision, and it remains, to this day, the only split decision win of Israel Adesanya's career. That means this is the only fight that went to the scorecards and there was dispute among the judges on who should have won that fight. Now, we'll get back to the X's and O's of that split decision win for Adesanya, but he went on after that close win versus Vettori and then beat in succession Brad Tavares, Derek Brunson, Anderson Silva, and Kelvin Gastelum up to his title shot against Robert Whittaker, where he stopped Whittaker in the second round via knockout. He actually knocked him out at the end of the first round, but Whittaker was saved by the horn. And then early in the second round, Adesanya sealed the deal with a true knockout of Robert Whittaker, who was just making his long-awaited return after a lot of health difficulty, a long layoff due to 2 brutal battles versus, Yoel Romero. Both very close wins, grueling, brutal fights, especially that second one. So Whittaker came back and then lost his title against the emerging and surging Israel Adesanya. And Adesanya has since defended his title twice versus Yoel Romero, won that one via decision. Not the funnest fight in the world to watch, especially if you know Yoel Romero's tendency to cause destruction in the cage. Well, this is like a 40-year-old Yoel Romero. So he's become, over the years, more and more selective in his energy output. So he'll sit back for 2-3 minutes of a round sometimes before he even throws anything significant. And this Adesanya versus Romero title fight was one of the worst examples of that. And worse meaning best examples, right? One of the most telling examples. It's just tough to watch for the fans. Well, after that lackluster title retaining win, Adesanya then disposed of Paulo Costa, then undefeated, via second round TKO. So at this point, Adesanya's just riding high, right? He's got 2 successful title defenses. He's got an undefeated 20-0 record. He took the UFC by storm, started beating these guys incrementally, beating an old Anderson Silva, stopping Derek Brunson, having a fight of the year type fight versus Kelvin Gastelum in pretty much, the interim champ title bout, and then stopping Robert Whittaker. So then, after that Costa destruction, Israel Adesanya challenges the newly minted light heavyweight champ, Jan Blachowicz, who upset Dominic Reyes for the title, the vacant title, relinquished by John Jones. Jan Blachowicz stops Dominic Reyes for that title, and then is challenged by Israel Adesanya, who goes up in weight class and loses a competitive decision to Blachowicz, where, the first 3 rounds, they were pretty even. I had Adesanya winning a couple of those first 3 rounds. But then in the 4th round, Jan Blachowicz secures a takedown. Israel Adesanya is unable to work his way back up to his feet and is pretty much just, laying there, not taking a ton of damage, but unable to bring the fight back into the realm where he was starting to surge. And he started to outland Jan Blachowicz in the 3rd round. So it looked like the tide was turning from being an even fight to Israel Adesanya picking up steam through the 3rd and even into the 4th, until Jan Blachowicz secures that 4th round takedown, pretty much keeps him down, and then secures the takedown again in the 5th round. And by that time, you pretty much knew, Israel Adesanya is probably not getting back up, which means we're going to be heading into the scorecards where Jan Blachowicz, at the very least, should have a 3-2 decision win. And Blachowicz did win that fight unanimously. So now Adesanya is going back to middleweight to defend his title because he never did drop that middleweight title. So he's defending it here against Marvin Vettori, who himself is on a 5-fight win streak. And each one of those opponents in that streak has become incrementally better, except for maybe his last one. I wouldn't say Kevin Holland is better than Jack Hermansson. Jack Hermansson at one point was like 1 fight away from himself challenging for the title. And this is when Hermansson, after losing to Thiago Santos back in 2017 via TKO, I think it was like a body kick, and he got finished by, former title contender Thiago Santos, who gave Jon Jones a losing scorecard, basically forcing Jon Jones to a split decision win and being the first to win a judge's scorecard versus Jones. So Hermansson loses to him and then beats Thales Letis, Gerald Meerschaert, stops David Branch via very creative guillotine choke, similar to how he stopped Gerald Meerschaert just before that. And then Hermansson decisions Jacare Souza. And then Hermansson ran into Jared Cannonier and lost via TKO. So after that, he comes back and he beats Kelvin Gastelum via quick heel hook submission win. And then Darren Till pulls out of a fight, which leaves a short notice fight between Jack Hermansson and Marvin Vettori. And Marvin Vettori, I thought Hermansson was going to win this, but Marvin Vettori pulls off the decision win, mixing it up. But basically winning this fight through the stand-up, through the striking. Jack Hermansson is one of the most dangerous submission experts in the sport. So it would serve Marvin Vettori, who's got a very varied skill set, to employ more of his stand-up game against Jack Hermansson, because that was going to be the most likely way that Vettori would have the edge. So this was a very competitive fight, and Vettori has the biggest win of his career versus Hermansson. And then in Vettori's next fight, he basically takes down Kevin Holland, an excellent striker who has in recent months been exposed for a totally inept ground fighter. If you take him down and are able to secure control, you could pretty much hold him down in a similar way that Jan Blachowicz was able to take down and keep down Israel Adesanya. So then the natural question is, will Marvin Vettori be able to take down and keep down Israel Adesanya in not only the same way that Jan Blachowicz was up in 205 light heavyweight, but also in the way that earned Marvin Vettori one of the 3 judges' scorecards the first time he fought Israel Adesanya in that split decision Adesanya win? Well, although Marvin Vettori is surging right now, has gone on this win streak, and is a better stand-up fighter, and I would say grappler, than when he fought Adesanya the first time. He definitely has a lot more experience over the past couple years. But so does Adesanya. Adesanya has fought everybody from Brunson to Silva to Gastelum to Robert Whittaker to Paulo Costa since the first time he fought Marvin Vettori. So although his style is still of the kickboxing variety and many of his tools are still the same, I do see some things that Adesanya does differently today than he did when Vettori gave him problems in the first fight. That doesn't mean that Vettori won't be able to take him down, but this is a 5-round title fight, and although Vettori does have the experience, the 3-round experience against Adesanya, and has himself now been in 2 5-round fights, he being Vettori, has now fought 5 rounds with Hermansson and 5 rounds with Kevin Holland, who, like Adesanya, would rather keep the fight in the stand-up than on the ground. I think that Adesanya has solidified a lot of his takedown defense, at least along the cage, but I see a lot more angle changing and a lot more feints, level changing, and then circling. Different things that Adesanya is doing to keep a lot of the heat off him, even from people who do want to take him down. Now, in recent fights, it wasn't until Blachowicz where somebody made a committed effort to take Adesanya down. Costa didn't really do a lot of that. Yoel Romero didn't. Whittaker didn't. Gastelum really didn't. I mean, there might have been an attempt here and there, but not a committed game plan where I'm going to fake the stand-up game to find opportunities to then get you on your back, especially around the middle of the cage. Not so much along the fence line. As I said, Israel Adesanya has become very, very good at that takedown defense. But Vettori can do it in the middle of the cage in a way that I think some of these other guys Adesanya has been fighting haven't been able to do, except for Jan Blachowicz. So here's the question. Has Adesanya learned and done enough to use his tools, his feints, his circling, his leg kicks, and so forth to keep the guy from fighting a competitive stand-up with him, setting him up for the takedown? Or is Vettori well skilled enough to manage when he's going to take Adesanya down over the course of 5 rounds to where he can win a decision? I don't see Vettori knocking Adesanya out unless he's able to fake enough takedowns to where he could go high. Think Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal, where if this was strictly a stand-up fight, you would have to still favor Masvidal. Even today, after that knockout, you would have to, I think, favor Masvidal if it was just going to be stand-up with no threat of the takedown. Well, is Adesanya spooked enough from this last experience he just had with Blachowicz, along with knowing the difficulties he had 3 years ago versus Vettori, to where Vettori can threaten low, be somewhat competitive, hopefully for Vettori's sake, in the stand-up where he could get a leg kick in, he could get a straight right hand in and mix it up a bit? Again, Vettori's got a pretty well-rounded skill set. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. He's got a wrestling experience. And, kickboxing was the first thing he ever trained in around the age of 13. So Vettori is schooled enough and Swiss Army knife enough where I think he can potentially prey on Adesanya's newly, discovered vulnerabilities, or at least newly exploited, if not previously discovered, and go high with a looping punch and can catch Adesanya. Adesanya's been rocked before, and I think that he could find enough opportunities to secure enough takedowns to where he can win a 3-2 decision. And there are a lot of reasons to think that that is what can indeed happen in this fight. I just still feel like it's more likely that Adesanya is able to control the distance, because I think that he has, again, improved with even as good as his stand-up was when he came into the UFC, and as good as it was when we could tell him stopping Derek Brunson early in his, at least earlier in his UFC career. He has still improved a lot over the past couple of years. So I think that it's more likely that he controls the distance, lands enough leg kicks to severely compromise Vettori in the same way that he compromised Paulo Costa and totally kind of had him out on an island, looking a step behind, a step slow, and just looking, kind of helpless at a certain point and confused. Now, the reason I think that this is more likely is because I have a lot of respect for Jan Blachowicz's stand-up game. Not only his power, but his, kind of step back. He doesn't get involved in a ton of brawls. He's more of a patient, step back, and then find your opportunities to ambush type of stand-up fighter. Whereas I think Vettori does have a little bit more rough around the edges, let's get nasty and brawl a little bit tendencies. And I think that is going to cost him against Adesanya. Even if that let's brawl is a way of goading him and then taking him down, which would be, again, a good strategy. I just think that Adesanya is not biting on a lot of that. I don't know how psychologically affected Adesanya is from this recent loss, even if it was up a weight class, and even if he didn't take a ton of damage and punishment, there might still be elements of that experience that carry into this fight to where he's kind of thinking, oh shoot, he's about to go for the takedown, to where again he could be vulnerable for strikes, leg kick up high, punches up high, because he's thinking so much, I better be prepared to stuff these takedowns and keep this fight in the stand-up. So I do think that there will be big opportunities for Vettori here. Now, he's not known to stop people in the stand-up. 4 out of his last 5 wins have come via decision. And even the one that wasn't via decision was a submission win. It wasn't a knockout. So if he does knock Adesanya out, that will be uncharacteristic for Vettori. So it sounds like it should be very unlikely, but strange things happen, especially when you consider the variance in matchups here. But I think that it's more likely that Adesanya stops Vettori because of his supremely advanced stand-up game, and I don't think Vettori is as sophisticated as Jan Blachowicz or as dangerous as Jan Blachowicz in the stand-up. So I think that it's more likely that even if Vettori scores a first or second round takedown, that he will be tired enough and compromised enough in the middle rounds to where Adesanya, instead of getting grinded down by the grinder being Vettori, that it's more likely that he's able to kind of keep enough moments in the stand-up to exploit Vettori and to badly hurt him and eventually stop him via third or fourth round TKO. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this upcoming middleweight title fight. Let me know if you think that this last loss versus Blachowicz and that previous close decision win versus Vettori 3 years back for Adesanya is going to play into this Adesanya versus Vettori rematch. Please leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.